Good evening, everybody. My name is Eugene Peterson, and I've been asked by our chair, Georgia Noon Sherrard, to be the designee to chair and convene the meeting of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission tonight. I have a few ground rules I'd like to remind everybody that's on the call, including speakers. Number one, do not use chat. If you use chat that shows up on the screen, we don't want that to happen. And everybody should be muted, except for me, I guess, to start out with. And then if you want to ask a question, please hold all questions till after our presenters have finished. And when you unmute, I'll recognize you as you unmute. If two people unmute and there's a little confusion, we'll let one go first and then we'll go from there. Everybody okay with that? Okay. The mission of the Human Relations Commission is that we work to promote the fair and equal treatment of county residents, to counteract racism, discrimination, intolerance, and hate bias incidents. And our vision is working together for equality. Okay, is Mary Dadoni on the phone? Mary,
Yes,
can you unmute? Pardon?
I have. Can I be? Am I heard? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Then I will gladly call the roll call. Commissioner Georgia Noon Sherrod, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Oluwatosin Agboola.
Aye.
Hi. And we'll have the pronunciation lessons later. Thank you. Commissioner Mark Aptar, are you on the line? Commissioner Mary Dadoni is here. Commissioner Faye Gaskin.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mohan Grover. Commissioner Eugene Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Tony Pratt. Commissioner Khalid Said.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Commissioner John Watts. That is 6 commissioners present at the start of this meeting. We typically have more join us a few minutes later, but 6 is a quorum.
Thank you, Mary. I would now move to the adoption of the agenda. If there are no questions, I'd like to adopt it by consensus. I'm not hearing any questions, so the agenda is adopted by consensus. I now like to move to approval of the minutes May 6, 2020, May 21, 2020, and June 18th, 2020. And I'll ask Mary to explain how we are to proceed with this task.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Peterson. The minutes have been sent out in advance. I acknowledge that it wasn't a great deal of advance. I have received comments on the minutes from May 21st. The minutes from May 21st have been tabled to this meeting. We were running out of time at our June 18th meeting. And so those were the first set that went out, and those are the ones I received comments on. I think that the agenda has approval of minutes from May 6th, May 21st, and June 18th. I don't believe there was a May 6th meeting. We don't have minutes to approve from that, but we did also have an emergency meeting on June 3rd. There's little to record in those minutes other than who was present. That was a discussion with a number of representatives from the county and from the community, and we were taking questions that had been submitted to us beforehand and sharing those for discussion. Those are very brief minutes, and mostly they refer to the online videos of the meeting. And then the minutes for our last official meeting, which was June 18th, have also gone out. All of the minutes refer to the videos for details of the discussions. We never record the details of the discussions. We record action items, decisions, important discussion points, items that are tabled, etc. But in this case, because we have the video, we can refer to it. Commissioner Peterson, you're speaking, but I think you're muted still.
Oh, sorry. The actions we're taking then are, we have the May 21st and people can send corrections into them. You say you sent out the May 18th too?
June 18th and June
18th.
3rd. Yes.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Mary.
If it's possible, I would like to have someone move to accept these by common consent with the understanding that I will continue to incorporate corrections that I receive over the next week.
Great. Is there a motion to accept them with common consent with corrections to be received rolling in? We will give you the next week to give all comments, and then they'll be posted with the comments and corrections.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Peterson, you're muted still.
Oh, can somebody second the motion, please?
I did, Georgia. I second that motion.
And who? I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. I have a problem with the seeing the folks. So it was the motion was made by, was it Faye?
Faye, correct.
Right, and seconded by Georgia. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Oh, I'm sorry. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We now will move to the meat of our agenda, and we will ask Alana to give us the human relations, Alana Dennis to give us the human relations report. And she'll introduce the introduction of dialogues of race and guest speakers who will tell us of that effort. Okay, Alana.
Hi, how are you doing? Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am Alana Dennis, as you all know, the Human Relations Officer, and I wanted to bring to the forefront something that several of you are already aware of with regards to the dialogues series that really is going to be up to vote for official formal vote this evening by the commission as to whether or not to take the lead on facilitating these community dialogues on race, having authentic, healthy discussions on the issue of race, systemic racism, the very core issues that we're hearing throughout our community and the nation in the current times. So with that in mind, we've had some preliminary discussions with Department of Justice, CRS. We have a guest speaker here. Actually, Department of Justice, as several of the commissioners are aware, during the February Hate Crimes Forum, one of the co-sponsors of that event, in addition to the Anne Arundel Community College, public schools, library, and of course the county executive's office, was the Department of Justice. And so a continuation of just the next level of having these dialogues on race in the community, I wanted to respectfully now invite Chris Van Alstine to talk about what dialogues on race is, a little bit about your SPIRIT program, Chris, and how your agency and division within the Department of Justice can help the commissioners and local communities in trying to deal with these very difficult, uncomfortable issues that we have to deal with, we have to face. So Chris, I'm put it on mute and ask that you take the microphone. Chris Van Alstine, if you are here, it is yours.
Great, Alana, thank you so much. And it's great to work with Anne Arundel County again. And my colleague Charles has dialed in, and I think he's been put on mute. I don't know if you can see his phone number, but I believe back in 2013 he did what we call a SPIRIT program, and that's a site problem identification and resolution of issues together. And it was very successful. He did that for the county. But the Department of Justice Community Relations Service was implemented in 1965 to help guide the 1964 Civil Rights Act to fruition. We've existed and worked since then with communities across the nation working on issues related to race, religion, gender identity, as well as national origin. We also have authorities under the 2009 Hate Crimes Prevention Act. And one of our programs that we have done a significant amount of work with is the SPIRIT program. And again, we do that in schools or in counties or in cities, and that's the problem identification and resolution of issues together, where we take affinity groups, people who might associate or identify with business, academia, different racial groups, non-conforming groups, and have them identify what's working well in an area, what's not working well, and come up with priorities of what those affinity groups would like to see change or continue. And then the second half of that program, we usually do it in 1 day or 2 half days. The second half is we take those affinity groups and break them up into non-like groups and mix everybody up, shake up the Etch-a-Sketch, and then go through those same questions and see what is working, what's not working, and come up with an idea of what has worked well and where things could be improved at a county level, and then help that county through dialogue, discuss what plan of action would be needed over a period of years, and from a community act as a third-party neutral to come up with a committee to help implement a plan developed during that process. And we've been doing that for decades with a lot of success. Another program that we did just in Annapolis City, I believe 6-7 years ago, was the Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships. And often our police and professional police forces have trouble recruiting, trouble connecting to all parts and all demographics of a community. And through that Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships, we again identify what's working well, what's not working well, and through precincts, wards, or communities or neighborhoods, try to connect police to the population that they serve on a daily basis. So the first iteration that we actually did of that program as a component of Department of Justice was in Annapolis. And since then, we've taken that nationwide, briefed it at national police conventions and conferences, and done it at other cities. The other area I want to talk about is the dialogue on race. And we have facilitators work in a community, identify community leaders, come up with a planning group, and then kind of within sub-districts of a county, facilitate dialogues on race, come up with an action plan based on the feedback of the entire community, and help a county or a community or a city come up with an action plan to implement ideas and ways to increase harmony in a community where there's been problems. And I think the one community that we really stand out and we advertise was Staten Island after the Eric Garner case. And that was in 2014 when an individual was in a chokehold by NYPD and passed away. But we found there was incredible racial tensions in Staten Island and divisions. And through community forums, community meetings, community dialogues, and community dinners, that community was able to heal and better tie the community leaders to their different neighborhoods and demographics. So I wanted to kind of keep it brief. I can provide more written information and supplementary information as needed, because I know time is limited tonight, and I'm standing by for any questions.
Wonderful, thank you. And I wanted to say, just so that the commissioners know, the whole dialogue series that we're proposing, and that was a part of the discussion, included dialogues on race, and included also some other series of discussions on wellness and health in the midst of this the simultaneous pandemics that we're dealing with, from COVID-19 to systemic racism to health economic disparities. And then there was another component of the series that the commission may not be aware of, that some of the commissioners will be attending I think two tomorrow, at a planning committee on sh sharing the resources within the county and community on conflict resolution and de-escalation, sharing tips, tools, active listening, things of that nature. We're trying to be proactive and trying to help the community in addressing the needs that folks are asking, both within the county government workforce, but also clearly within the community at large. I know, Chris, and I do have a question for clarity. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this understanding, is that your division, CRS, can facilitate training for the trainers, for the facilitators on dialogues on race. Is that correct?
Alana, yeah, thank you. We can work with community leaders to provide facilitator training and to provide a structure of how to do this on their own and work as a third party neutral.
Perfect.
And all of our services are confidential by law. We can't release or share information. Everything we do is non-attributional. It's not reported anywhere. So confidential as well as free. Our services are free. And we do have some top-notch facilitators and mediators who've worked things like Ferguson in 2014, things like Baltimore in 2015, and have worked significant areas of tensions around civil rights.
Okay, thank you, sir. And then on the sidebar, I know you referenced your colleague, Charles. Can you text me his separate, don't put it in this public format, but if you can text my confidential cell phone, his number, and I can let Kaylee know to let him in if there's at a later point some additional information that he may want to add to the discussion, because I know he's listening in. I really wanted to ask all of the commissioners. I know George and Eugene are going to be at the meeting tomorrow, but all the commissioners, just as relates to their support of this county, these initiatives and these dialogues for the community. I believe one of the vision that we had was possibly with the commissioners receiving some of the initial training on dialogues on race, and some of the folks, even within the county executive's office, for example, constituent services and community engagement, receiving, I think I got it twisted, but community engagement and constituent services, sorry, Pete, basically also receiving the training, as well as maybe even some of the folks in Anne Arundel Conflict Resolution Center, as some of the folks in the community, just naming a few, to receive the initial training on the dialogues on race, so that we in turn, as a body or the commission, the vision being the commission, can go and facilitate these discussions, whether virtually or in person. I guess it depends on the times, to the community at large. Yes, ma'am.
So Alana, this is Georgia. Mr. Chair, if I can, I'd like to add that I'm very familiar with the work of CRS from my years at the NAACP. And what I would suggest is, to the core of what we do as a community relations commission, we need to be prepared to respond to incidents, especially incidents of hate crime incidents. We should be prepared to respond to those, not be reactive. And I think that by making this level of training mandatory for all commissioners is going to be key to us doing that, okay? And let me explain why. We should not be attempting to identify leaders in communities when incidents occur. What we should be able to do is have a rapid response team put together and a methodology to say, this is how we will respond in these particular incidents, whether it was Gina 6 or some of the examples that Chris gave earlier. The thing that made the response so productive and allowed the communities to heal as quickly as they did was having experts on the ground and people that were familiar in the communities with the leaders in the communities. And so I know that this process does work. And what I would like to suggest is that we make this level of training mandatory for commissioners, and just go ahead and try to figure out a time that is reasonable for everyone, but specifically the commissioners to participate and ask DOJ, CRS to just go ahead and book this for us. Thank you.
Facilitator Peterson, if I may speak.
Yes.
I am wholeheartedly in favor of this. I was aware of an effort to establish such conversations. I was not aware of the mechanism that was being proposed, that is the involvement of CRS. I have already referred one body to the possibility of working through the Human Relations Commission, possibly with the Conflict Resolution Center. Certainly, there are those of you in conversation around this, and I have advised people to bring intractable issues to you. When I say intractable, I want to make sure that these are the appropriate kind of issues. Repeated reports of bias, behavior, and language in 1 or 2 or 3 school systems, ongoing for generations, 3 generations of a family, for years, and the school complaint system is not bringing the level of, it is not bringing healing and resolution. It is seen as a way of wasting people's time and trying to divert them until they're too tired to complain anymore. If that is something we can bring to this body, I think that would be very valuable. I'm sure there are other examples. That's the one that's foremost in my mind. I do have a concern. I don't think there's any way on this lovely earth that I would ever be considered a neutral third party, even though I have attempted to be. How do we deal with that?
Good question, Mary. Something maybe we want to have a fuller discussion at another meeting on. I don't know if we could take action at this time. And I think the focus right now is on where to go with this dialogue question. But I think your concerns are valid. And as you know, I've agreed to join you with the education committee. So we'll be working together full time on that.
Mm-hmm.
And Commissioner Peterson and Commissioner Dodone, I wanted to just add to this, if this is helpful, Mary, that in the initial dialogues or discussions about these dialogues, we have extended invitation to the public school system. Dr. Maisha Gillens will be present, and we certainly will wholeheartedly extend an invitation for the school system to participate in the training as it relates to the CRS training I'm talking about with dialogues on race. And before, I just want to acknowledge Chris, your colleague, Charles. I think he has joined us. And I don't know if he has anything, or if he heard the dialogue, but if he has anything to add to this in support of these dialogues on race, he can certainly feel free in this moment. Anything, Sir Charles? Sir Charles?
Yes, I have been muted. I think Chris covered everything very well. As far as the county spirit that was done in 2013 and the program that was done with the police department, I did both of those, and would be happy to answer anybody's questions online or offline at any time. So just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Peterson, Chair, Commissioner Peterson, this is Georgia Nunsharad. I did want to, I left that out there, and I don't think that we closed on the suggestion should I make a formal motion suggesting the training, or how would you prefer that we handle this?
I think we should have a motion.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to make the motion that that the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission commissioners be required to attend training, dialogues on race, hosted by Department of Justice CRS Department.
Seconded.
There's a second by Mary. Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Charles. I know that on behalf of the commission, we all appreciate your time, and I will be in touch, and/or Commissioner Eugene or Commissioner Georgia Noon Sherrod, or one of us. We will be in touch, most likely me, with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite. Charles and I have worked in the county before, and I've lived in Pasadena for a brief time when I worked with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So thanks, and I wish we could meet at Cantler's after this to have crab and something else. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll consider you an honorary Anne Arundian.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, Alana. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Chris.
Now we're going to move on our agenda to the update on evictions, and we will go as follows on the agenda. We'll get a current resources availability by Kathy Koch, Arundel Community Development. We'll get the legal review of the governor's executive order and the existing process by Ethan Hunt, Office of Law, and then next steps by Pete Barron, Director of Governmental Relations. So, Kathy, you're on deck.
Commissioner Peterson, this is Pete Barron. Can I say one thing before Mr.
Yes.
started? Thanks again. It's great to be in front of this group. I think I'm becoming a bit of a regular, so I'm excited to see you all again. I neglected to mention to Alana when we discussed bringing this forward to add a little bit about what we've already done. So if you don't mind, I'm going to insert myself on the front end to talk about what we've done, hand it over to Ms. Koch. She'll pass it on to Mr. Hunt, and then I'll wrap it up with future steps.
Makes perfect sense, Pete. Go right ahead.
So just so everybody's aware, also joining us this evening is our new Deputy CAO for Health and Human Services, Ms. Pam Jordan. So she's here to help answer and add anything as well. Just very briefly, this has been an issue that we've all been very concerned about in the administration. I know this group has been very concerned about evictions, foreclosures, debt collection, all these issues that are heightened with what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic fallout. Just to give some sense, and Mr. Hunt from Office of Law will talk about the steps that were taken through executive orders and the federal stuff in the CARES Act. But here in Arundel, County Executive Pittman has been advocating for additional resources from the state and federal level. We communicated with our federal representatives during the development of the CARES Act. We are in continuous communication with our federal representatives as they work on whatever the successor bill currently called the HEROES Act that is in front of Congress now for more resources to individuals who are facing the threat of an eviction or a foreclosure or debt collection. On June 10th, the county executive, along with other county executives in the region, sent a letter to Governor Hogan asking for more resources when the moratorium to help people through this period, and then when the moratorium is lifted, to consider additional steps to take. We are been in communication recently as the moratorium deadline has gotten closer. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Koch to talk about all the programs that the county has put in place. And I know she will do it, but I'm going to ask everyone here and anybody listening to help spread the word to people about these programs so folks are aware of the resources that are available. Ms. Koch?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be here, especially before a commission that recently got legitimized and set up. And I've worked many years trying to see that happen. As a housing person in the county, it brings me great joy to see all of you working hard here. Kathy Koch, the head of Arundel Community Development Services, which is the county's Office of Housing and Community Development. I'm proud to say that Anne Arundel County was the first one in the state and probably one of the first ones in the country to put forward, because of our county executive support, to put forward an eviction prevention program. We started off, I think we had a little over $1 million made available. We had about 2 people set up to start taking the phone calls. And we quickly became overwhelmed and reassigned 7 additional people, have hired some new people. And through the CARES Act, the county has made, we have a total of $4.5 million available. And what we're doing is we're making dollars available to people who, we started off with people who were pre-COVID at 80% and below the median income. As we were overwhelmed with the need, as we move forward, we're focusing it more on the most needy and addressing the people at 60% and below the median income pre-COVID. Basically, a person comes into our office or applies through our office for assistance. Their income has to be negatively affected by COVID, and then we will work with them. And what we do, we also work with the landlords. The dollar amount that we pay out goes directly to the landlord. To the landlord, we strongly encourage our people coming through the process to work closely with the landlord so that they have a plan. We have a 2-step process. We have staff that's taking people in through a processing series where they help the people gather the paperwork that they need to, whether it be their W-2 or their tax returns, and then a letter from their employer showing that they have been negatively affected by COVID. And we also collect bank statements, and then we also collect evidence on what type of assistance they are currently receiving. They then move on to work one-on-one with a case manager. And what our goal is to help them get current with the, as you know, there's a moratorium on evictions. However, people are still going to owe that money once that moratorium is lifted, and which is going to be very, very difficult for people to catch up, especially people at income levels and people who were paying a large percentage of their income toward their housing before pre-COVID. So what we do is we work with them, get them to bring their rent current, and then make sure that they have a plan in place to stay housed. The goal of the program is to prevent evictions and prevent homelessness, so that we do a lot of case management and make sure that they are talking to their landlords, and the longer that the crisis goes on, of course, the harder it gets. But to make sure that whether they're back at work or putting together a plan to make sure that they can become whole again. We've had over 1,200, close to 1,300 people that we have assisted, that they're coming through our process. And we are working with 3 different agencies. So it's not only our agency that they can apply for assistance, but they can also the Community Action Agency, Lighthouse, and also Partnerships for Children, Youth, and Families. So all 4 agencies are processing applications. And we're over 1,000 people are working with case managers already, and fewer and fewer people are on our waiting list as we start to process people through. So that's that. If people are interested in the program, what they need to do is dial 410-222-7600, and then it's extension 2. And when they leave a message, and please, please, please leave a very, very clear message and make sure that we have your email. We may not get back to you right away, but we will eventually get to you. Again, we don't see this as an emergency just yet. So we're processing as best we can. You can also go to our website, which is acdsinc.org. And on that website, there's a pre-application that you can fill out and send in to us also. More information on the program. So that's the program that we're working on right now, and we're working on a few other things. I think that Pete's going to talk a little bit more toward the end of the session. So available to answer any questions.
Ms. Koch, I was just wondering if we could be of some assistance by posting your website on our Facebook page and also on our county the designation site, so there are multiple ways people can get this information. Do you think that would be helpful?
I think that would be extremely helpful. So what I'll do is, do I send that to Ilana? Ilana, I have a flyer. Okay,
Yes,
we have a flyer that we will send, and that would be very helpful if you'll post that. That would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
This is Mary. Yes, Mr. Barron asked us to actively spread the word. You've just recommended one way of doing that by posting flyers. Are there any other recommendations from Ms. Koch or Mr. Barron about how we can actively engage? And then I'll turn that into a motion.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think absolutely social media, especially with everybody at home now, is one of the best ways. So I have a personal Twitter account with I think all of 70 followers. So I will spread it there. You should do it on your own personal networks if you feel comfortable doing that. If you know of any organizations, churches, civic groups that have any contact with folks who might be in need, send them the flyer. Even shooting an email to your pastor or your rabbi is a good thing to do.
Right, especially at some of the food, if the food handouts, all the food pantries. If you are active with your church and working at a food pantry, to take a group of our flyers and hand them out with the food would be extremely helpful.
Okay, then my motion is that the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission actively post the flyer that we're going to receive from Ms. Koch on our website, which is the county website, and on our Facebook page to remain at the top of the Facebook page. Do we have an Instagram account yet?
Not sure. We'll check with Mark and see where we are with that.
Okay, so, and any other social media pages we have. So that's part one of the motion. Part two is that individually commissioners are requested to share the flyer both electronically within our networks and expand out through the networks which have their own reach, and wherever possible to provide printed copies at places where we know people are in need. For example, food distribution centers.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been
Thank you,
properly
Wade.
moved.
Thank
Yes.
you.
It's been properly moved by Mary and seconded by Khalid. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Oh,
Aye.
sorry. Okay, we got it. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, I think Ms. Koch is done. Now we'll move on to the legal review.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Ethan Hunt. I'm an assistant county attorney in the Anne Arundel County Office of Law. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the eviction process and how the executive orders and federal legislation have sort of impacted that process. So basically, the way an eviction case works is if someone has failed to pay their rent or breached the lease in some way, the landlord can file a complaint in district court to retake possession of the property. And that's set in for a trial. And after the trial, if the judge awards possession of the property to the landlord, the tenant has 4 days to vacate the property. And if they don't, the landlord can come back and apply for what's called a warrant of restitution. And the warrant of restitution is what is given to the sheriff. And then the sheriff has 60 days to work with the landlord to get the folks out of the property. Now, going back to March, when the COVID crisis first started, the governor issued an executive order, I believe it was March 16th, and then subsequently amended it on April 10th, saying that a judgment or warrant of restitution could not be issued if a tenant could show they had suffered a substantial loss of income. And what substantial loss of income means in the executive order, it's not just limited to you lost your job because of COVID-19. It's if you lost your job, if your hours were reduced, if you have childcare obligations that prevent you from work, if you're a business owner whose business was shut down as a result of the health measures that needed to be taken by various local governments. So all those qualify as a substantial loss of income. And then in late March, the Federal CARES Act was passed. And the CARES Act contained a provision that imposed a 120-day moratorium on evictions and foreclosures for certain properties that had federally backed mortgages or were funded through federal programs. Now, when the CARES Act passed, the court system completely stopped hearing any foreclosure and eviction matters, just because of the complications it would create between hearing cases that had both, I would guess, private mortgages or bank mortgages, and then federally backed mortgages. Now that federal moratorium expires on July 25th. And as part of the court reopening process, they have agreed to start hearing certain eviction matters after that date. However, the governor's order prohibiting evictions when someone has suffered a substantial loss of income, that still remains in effect. Now, the chief judge of the district court, which is the trial court level that oversees and hears eviction matters, the chief judge, John Morrissey, issued a communication last Friday. And there are several different components of it. But the big things in it that I think are important to you are basically that a failure to pay rent case that was filed before March 27th, which is when the court imposed their moratorium. So a failure to pay a rent case that was currently pending with the court filed before March 27th can now be set for a trial on or after Monday, August the 31st. So that's the end of next month. Courts are also going to, starting July 25th, they're going to start processing some warrants for restitution that were outstanding when the court imposed their moratorium. So those warrants of restitution that they're going to start processing, those are from judgments dating back to March. So those are cases that have already been heard, judgments have been issued, and then before the warrant of restitution was executed, the process was halted by the court system as part of the eviction moratorium. And then, complaints that were filed between March 16th and July 25th. They're required to file what's called a certificate of compliance with the CARES Act, just to ensure that a property isn't one of those that would be affected by the federal moratorium. And one other point I want to make is that the governor's executive order, which is in effect and will continue to remain in effect, states that until the state of emergency is terminated, no court shall give judgment for possession or repossession or warrant for restitution. Now, that order was issued April 10th, and the governor's declarations of emergency, he renews them every 30 days, and he's been renewing them at the end of the month. So as long as the declaration of emergency is renewed, his order prohibiting evictions for folks who have lost income as a result of COVID-19 continues to remain in effect. And in speaking with some of the other attorneys and other people, given the way numbers are trending, I suspect he will renew the state of emergency again at the end of this month, which would continue his eviction moratorium.
Thank you, Councilor Hunt. Any questions?
Okay.
Barry, did you have a question?
Yeah. Yes, I do. How do we get involved with this? It's great to have this information, but there are going to be desperate people looking all sorts of places. So this is the same question I had last time. Last time I had a really easy answer because Ms. Koch is going to send us a flyer. Now we have a lot of complicated information, detailed information, juggling dates, ifs and thens. What can you do for us to help us be effective? And then I ask us, the commissioners, what do we want to do? What do we feel is our responsibility and ability to help?
Mr. Peterson, Commissioner Peterson, this is Georgia Sherrod. Can I be recognized, please?
You certainly may.
Mary, to answer your question, I think that we've got to see the process through because Ms. Koch has laid out a very clear two-step process. And I need some clarification on this because there are a number of different agencies that get involved before we would need to be involved. And so even though we're concerned with due process being, in place, if the governor's declaration of emergency is in place, that seems to take care of some things, but there are always those outliers. There's landlord-tenant court, and there's also this process of mediation that we need to keep in mind, that if individuals are coming up with plans to pay their rent, the back rent, okay, the money that they would owe, and the landlords are still determined to evict them for whatever reason that they may have, I think that we should do our best to try to employ what we have in front of us, which is the process of getting two people at the table before they end up going to court. Okay, that can save a lot of time. It can kind of expand some of their options. Maybe the landlord is willing to let them stay in for another month or two, and that can be a part of their planning. Okay, so what I'd like to ask of Kathy is that a possibility that we could integrate mediation into the process when we see that the landlord and the tenant are unable to come to some types of reasonable terms?
Yeah, I think that's very important. So I'm going to answer in a two-part. The first part is where I think that you could help us think this through. I mean, one of the things is that the landlord has to be a willing partner. But one of the first things is he has to give us a W-9 because we have to issue a 1099 at the end of the year because it's income. And we have some landlords who aren't really interested in working with us. And so not that many, but we do come across it once in a while. Some of them we understand because they're taking money under the table and they're not reporting their income. you know, that kind of thing. But the other thing is that, you know, sometimes the landlord's not interested. And it's like, we're saying, well, wait a minute, we're willing to pay. And, you know, is this a violation of source of income? And so there might be some of those cases that we might want to think offline a little bit about and talk about and think about how we might refer those and get input and direction from you guys on some of those cases. So I think that's certainly one thing we've started to see already. Not on a large number, but we see it once in a while. The second thing is that we believe we're waiting to see what kind of mediation process the courts put in place. And again, Ethan may be better at this than me, but we're talking, there's talk about us really working with bringing on people who can do that type of mediation so that we can refer clients to you know, something that we're a mediation process and working with the courts and also working with the courts to kind of beef that up,
right,
for lack of a better word.
So I can tell you that I work directly with Shannon Baker with the district court on the ADR side. And so we meet, you know, weekly to talk about pretrial cases. So for the most part, we receive, the Conflict Resolution Center receives a lot of these cases, right? And as you say, it's voluntary. And if the landlord doesn't feel like working with you, then they kick you out. The incentive in this case is that at least there's some place in which there's some funds that they can receive. Because oftentimes the person says, well, I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to pay you rent. And so there's no real incentive. And they feel like, well, if I go to court, the judge is going to make this person pay something. There'll be a judgment against them. But because the courts are going to be so backlogged, what we're trying to do is get in front of the game and do as much virtual mediation with these individuals to say, hey, party A, party B, let's come together and talk about where we are and come up with a resolution, a potential agreement. And so we have the time right now to do that, especially considering we're talking things being pushed out to August. And in many cases, I don't think a lot of these cases are going to be seen until October, if not sooner. And then you're really just talking about when we're starting them. So I like your idea of having a side conversation on some of these where people are not really willing and it could truly be an issue of discrimination. That needs to immediately go in front of the commission and we investigate that and kind of pull through it that way. The other, truly being 100% voluntary, I think that could be a part of the planning that you do. An individual, let's say, for example, can't make up the back rent that they owe. They don't foresee when they're going to be able to go back to work. They're sick possibly, or things have changed dramatically. So they've got to find an alternative to where they currently live. And let's talk about when we can vacate the property with dignity and then, you know, do whatever is necessary. So I'd love to see, again, we could have a sidebar conversation, not to take up too much more of your time, but as a commission, I think we definitely need to be able to address this, which answers part of Mary's question. What tangible thing can we do to help people? And I think there's some pieces that are weaved in there, but it might be a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and having someplace to refer people and somebody who can work with our case managers, yes. I think that would be key because, you know, our first couple of months, I don't like to say they were easy. My staff would kill me, but we had so many phone calls. But now we're getting into the place where it's starting to get, you know, this is challenging. Yeah, we've put out, you know, some people up to 50. Our max right now is 5,400, and we're finding that, you know, especially people, you know, in the restaurant industry. Even if they're going back, they're not getting back to what their income was before. And so so one of the things we've looked at is they might be in an apartment that is too expensive for their future. And so we're kind of doing a little bit of counseling to say, so that if they want to look someplace else, our funds could be used for, you know, a first and last and deposits and the big amount of dollars you got to put out when you're going into a new place. You know, kind of work with people doing that and get them into a more stabilized situation. So, and that's a lot of work. So having people who we can work with to work through some of all these individual situations would be
great. Fantastic. So what I'm going to suggest, Alana, and Eugene, is that if we could have a separate conversation, maybe the housing committee with Ms. Koch, and figure out some next steps for that. I think that would probably be the best solution.
I think that's appropriate action to refer this to the housing committee with you and Ms. Koch, and come back to the commission when you're ready. I don't know whether it be the next meeting or a subsequent meeting with the next steps.
So considering that this is an immediate issue, what I would suggest is that we pull together quickly the housing committee, and then bring it before the executive committee to make some kind of decision.
Executive, yes.
That's going to be my
sense.
recommendation.
This is moving quickly. You're right.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for your time.
Okay. That's great. So we will follow up then, right? Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, there's no need for a motion on this. That's fine.
No.
Okay.
Please send
Thank you.
information to me as well, Kathleen, that you wanted me to forward as well. Thank you.
Yes.
If, sorry, Commissioner Peterson, may I be recognized?
No, that's, go ahead, Pete.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to add, and I know there's a lot more on the agenda after us, so I will be very quick with my section here. I want to add a couple of things that are happening in the near future. I love this idea and the discussion that just happened. So I think that is, I'm going to put that as something that I'm sure the county executive would wholeheartedly endorse. What I failed to mention in the beginning of what had happened, Monday night, and sorry, Commissioner Donnie, if I'm stealing a little thunder from the next agenda item about the council meeting. At the council meeting on Monday night, the council passed unanimously Resolution 30-20, which was a call on the governor to take steps to address the coming eviction crisis. It did make it into the Capitol story. There was some discussion around it, but it was actually a great moment because it was a unanimous vote, 6-0. One of the council members did have to recuse himself because he didn't have time to get an ethics opinion. But a 6-0 bipartisan vote, people are very concerned about this. So one of the things that I don't know if it's appropriate for this commission to do, but you guys could also write a letter along the same lines that the governor, or that the council sent to the governor. So I'd be happy. I'm sure Mr. Donnie has that resolution. If not, I'm happy to provide it. And so there has been a lot of discussion in the administration about what we can do to help really beef up Ms. Koch's, in particular, what ACDS is doing to address the coming issues with eviction. And I just want to put a plug in for everybody to stay tuned. I think we're going to have a couple of exciting announcements soon on that front, but we do need to do a little bit of due diligence before we talk publicly about them. But there was conversations even as late as 4 o'clock today about what we can do. And so I think there's going to be some exciting stuff, and we're trying to move with real urgency on this issue, as I know you all are. So with that, I'm happy to talk to anybody offline and strategize about how we can help folks in our county who are suffering from loss of income and the threat of eviction or foreclosure. I do want to give Ms. Jordan an opportunity to just say hello and introduce herself if you don't know her, and to correct me if I've missed anything or add anything. But our new DCAO for Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Pete. And I will echo Kathy's comments that I'm so excited for this group, having been the ADA coordinator at one point in my 40-year career with the government. I know that we were always anxious to have a codified housing commission. So congratulations to everybody. Great work. And I'm so excited to be with you. I want to make sure, I think we covered everything, and he did allude that we've got some exciting news. We're just doing our due diligence. As he said, we want to get things out that are clear and concise that the public can understand, and we will certainly count on you to help us spread that message. So just give us a little bit of time here, and we will have something for you. And I just want to put a little plug in, if I just could have a moment, about the food access warm line. If you have not heard about that, I want to make sure that you are spreading the word on that. We have people on standby of all languages to help people navigate food resources with seasoned case managers. And that was the last big lift I did before taking on the DCA role. So I know that the county executive is real excited about that. So let me make sure you have all the information you need about the food access warm line, which if
yes, it would be helpful if you had any link we could put on, again, our county page and our
yes.
Facebook page to those resources. That would be helpful.
You will receive that. Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner Peterson, this is Georgia News Sherrod. I want to say welcome to Pam Jordan, and full disclosure, she is a good friend and an amazing colleague, and I'm just so happy to have her on board in this role. I think that she's going to do I know that she's going to do some amazing things, having worked with her for a number of years and watched her lead the Department of Aging and Disability. So Pam, congratulations. We're so happy to have you in this role.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you for the warm welcome, everybody. Let me know anything I can do.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Georgia, for speaking for all of us on the commission. I know we really are happy with your promotion, I would say, Ms. Brown.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Oh, hearing none. Pete, you got anything else, or anybody else got any? Okay, they're all done. Let's move on to Mary giving us the county council update. Meeting up.
Here I am running a county council meeting late, so I'm going back to not Mondays, but the previous meeting, the county council. Most of you know that we took an email poll, drafted a very quick testimony to address bill number 4620, ordinance concerning residential rent increases during the catastrophic health emergency. The body of the bill said that rent increases from the date of enactment on out would not be greater than a 3% rent increase when a lease turned over, as long as at least one party to the lease was renewing. That passed, and it passed 4-3. So that was a party line pass, and it will be going into effect. There are a number of other bodies testifying that on that rental rate increase, residential rent increase. Also party to that was the NAACP, and ACT lobbied and spoke. I'm going to take that back. That was not a party line vote. ACT was very successful in directly meeting with some commissioners, and was able to ensure that that bill passed. It was not party line. Also at that meeting was the resolution for inclusion of the Human Relations Commission in the county charter. And that one passed 6-1. That means that the November 3rd general election will include a ballot item to establish the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission in the county charter. We did not weigh in on a very active discussion related to allocation of education funds. The education budget has been back and forth, back and forth. The last item to bounce back and forth between the Board of Education and the County Commission related to an additional $745,000 that had been allocated by the County Council to be put towards 7 transportation positions. The Board of Education reallocated those funds to what were described as mental health positions, specifically 5 additional school counselors, 1 additional school psychologist, and 1 additional education specialist, called an environment specialist, but with specific skills in restorative justice. That was taken up again by the county council, and they reallocated it to transportation, saying they had the last word, and that was a very clear and strong vote. And then school superintendent George Arlotto, Dr. Arlotto, said that what we're looking at are positions, funded positions that would go a full year, with all the unknowns in the education budget. He would not be doing an immediate hiring on that. So the school system will be receiving the funds. They understand that they are allocated to transportation, but those hires will not be made immediately because there's no certainty that that money will actually be there. And I'll talk more about the upcoming proposed budget cuts in education proposed by Governor Hogan when I talk about the Education Committee report. Commissioner Peterson, you're
Thank you for your report, Mary. And we'll now move.
Mr. Peterson, before you go any further, I did have a question or
Sure.
clarity.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. The Human Relations Commission, the November 3rd ballot issue, it'll be placed on the ballot. Just for clarity, that was the information that was shared with us at the last meeting. Just so that people are clear. If you need more information on that, I think there was a link in the minutes from the last meeting on that particular ballot.
There was actually a copy of the draft that had been given us by Mr. Barron, and I will put a link in the minutes for this meeting. It would be fruitful to listen to the discussion that followed that. We lost 1 vote because of the discussion we had in this body on another video recorded meeting was not viewed favorably by one of the county council members. So I will put the links in.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. As we move on, we'll go to committee reports. Community engagement, I believe Commissioner Pratt is sending us a report or has sent us a report. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, we've all received a report of her activities via email. I believe we just accept it for information.
Yes. Yeah, we just accept it for information. There's no need to vote on it. Mary, why don't you update us on the education committee?
Sure. So that's you and me so far. Welcome anyone else who wants to join us. It's going to be budget all the time for the foreseeable future. Last month, Governor Hogan proposed very large budget cuts across the state budget. The impact on education would have been $345 million budget cut across the state. That comes down to substantially less than that within the county. And I apologize for not having a list of the exact amount, but it would mean a cut in every program within the county. At the same time, we are now know, as of yesterday, that we will be going to virtual education for the first semester through the beginning of the year. That certainly will shift priorities. So there will be very rapid, short action time discussions on how budgets should be allocated. All I can do is commit to keeping this body informed as we go forward and offer the opportunity for us to weigh in if we wish to do so. I have experienced some challenges around the use of the word equity, the application of the idea of equity. It's essential, I believe, to the positions we take or seek to take. Within the Board of Education, there's reference to something called the MABE Equity Lens. This is it. MABE stands for the Maryland Association of Boards of Equity of Education. And it's a series of 5 questions. One asks to see if a proposed action is equitable. I will circulate this as well. I have applied this a couple of times now through my work with the NAACP. And what I have found is that when there are contentious issues, everything from grading when the first movement to virtual was made to the allocation of funds, should it be to the school counselor positions or should it be to the transportation specialist positions, all parties were stating loudly, emphatically, and with great conviction that their position was the equitable position, and yet people were coming up with different answers. What I found was that applying the analysis and writing out the answers was very valuable. The NAACP did exactly that. It is a time-consuming effort. We shared our results with the county council and published them. I want to bring to this body the question of whether we should be also applying the MABE equity lens and applying and publicizing what we see through it when we do take a position on educational issues. It doesn't need a motion. I'm just bringing that as a matter of awareness. I learned a great deal from going through these 5 questions and listening to what other people saw when they went through the 5 questions. This is a tool that's out there. Our Board of Education swears by it. Some people may swear at it, but I've seen very little evidence that it has been rigorously applied other than the recent efforts. Thank you for your time on that.
Right. Suggestion might be, do you have a copy of that you could send to all the commissioners so we all could take a look at it? Mary?
Absolutely, yes. And you can designate that as an action item, actually. You have the power to do that, and I will do that.
All right. It's an action item.
And I will be glad to share the analysis that the NAACP did, just because it's
Terrific.
the only example we have. It's not necessarily a great one, it's the only one.
Mary, Mr. Peterson, can I ask Mary a question? Has this been discussed or shared in the task force, in the Eliminating the Achievement Gap task force, this information?
Not yet. The next meeting of that is the leads tomorrow, and several people there are aware of it because they were part of it, but it hasn't been explicitly shared. I'll see to it that that's done.
The reason I'm asking is kind of twofold from the commission's perspective. We shared with the Eliminating the Achievement Gap the information that was gathered during the facilitations at the Hate Bias Incidents Forum. And so I want to make sure that all of the work that we're doing stays connected. We shared the email addresses and informations and did a formal invitation to all of the parties who attended those facilitations and said, please join this particular group, this task force. And within that task force, there are 5 subcommittees. Of those subcommittees, there's everything from systemic racism, there's school discipline, you know the different groups. And there seems to be in that space, when we talk about equity, as you're talking about the plan that the school district has, $750,000 being moved over to transportation, budget cuts here and there, and then at the beginning of the year, we're doing virtual education. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be an eye placed on what programs are being put in place, how those programs are being funded, and how that differs from the traditional formula of education. Because there seems to be an opportunity for us here to either lose or win, and the loser being our children. If the funds are not being redirected to technology, especially for those children who face enormous inequities, whether it be their inability to have food security, they're not getting those 3 square meals a day, they're not getting transportation to and from school to get those meals, they're not having the one-on-one instruction, you name it. Those students with IEP, special education 504, we need to have those individuals engaged with that group, because I think that's where the recommendations should come from, is with one or several of those subcommittees, okay? So I really would like to make sure that whatever we're doing, that it ties back to that particular constituency, because those are the people who share their concerns with us. And so they need to be engaged. They are an extension, so to speak, of this commission and the work that we've started. So I'd like to make that recommendation that we make sure that Maisha Gillen, who is the executive director of the Office of Equity, is aware that we would like to make sure that those individuals that we've invited participate on those subcommittees, and that subcommittee is aware of the findings from that you just mentioned, the Mays equity piece.
Thank you. I'd certainly invite you to be the 3rd member of the Education Committee if you would be willing to do so. Oh, I guess that's a no.
No, it's not that it's a no. It's just, yeah, yeah. I can talk with you all about that. It's just a matter of, I'm stretched beyond.
We'll take your input.
Yeah, thank you very much.
One of the things I discovered as I talked around and sought out as broad a body of input as possible. So after the NAACP finished it, I talked to some other people, and I found a new way of looking at the school budget. Not only do we have 85,000 students to be concerned about, we have a very large body of employees and retirees. I believe the school system is the largest employer in the county.
Yes.
And it is self-supporting, self-insuring. We have a large number of retirees and current employees who are risking unemployment, risking loss of insurance, and there are equity issues there as well.
Absolutely. I'll help however I can is my response.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Okay. Why don't we, if there's nothing else on education, why don't we move on to training schedule proposal? Khalid, do you have one?
Dr. Sayed, you're on mute.
Sorry, you can talk to Faye because she is more aware about this issue. She's more aware than me.
Okay, this is a carryover from the last meeting, and the training committee met. The training committee met, and we thought that we should have some type of training component at each meeting. And so we are proposing for the September meeting that we have an ethics training by Michael Baceris, the director of Anne Arundel County Ethics Commission. But the thing here is that every commissioner has to complete the ethics training before he will come and do the presentation to the commission as a whole. I'm not sure how many commissioners still have to complete the ethics training, but it's absolutely necessary that everyone completes that training online. And then for the October 20th meeting, we are proposing fair housing training by Ms. Robin Dorsey, who is the director of the Fair Housing Action Center of Maryland. We have been in contact with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights to get some information from them on the types of training that they have available. Alana has been trying to reach out to them. I had been unsuccessful, but she had a contact there. So she's been reaching out to them and trying to get them to meet with us to let us know what they have available. During this period of COVID, when most of the meetings will be remote, we're also trying to find out of those trainings that you have available, which ones would lend themselves to a remote setting. So those are the things that we are looking at this moment. But we would like to get your approval to go ahead with the ethics training for September meeting and fair housing for the October meeting.
Mr. Peterson, can I ask a question of Commissioner?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Faye, good evening, Faye. We just made the motion and it passed as it relates to the CRS training.
Mm-hmm.
Can we look to add that in also, and possibly with a separate of a meeting? Would that be something that you think would be reasonable? And the only reason that I ask is with everything that we know that's happened here recently with the George Floyd murder and with Breonna, and then of course here recently with the resignation of the police chief, I just feel as though, and nothing concrete, that we really need to be proactive as it relates to these community relations meetings on race, dialogues on race. So I'd like to just get your opinion on that and hear what the rest of the commission would like to, how we'd like to, present that training.
Absolutely. As I said, this was a carryover from the last meeting, so we had not had that conversation prior to this report being drafted. So I don't have an issue with that. Khalid, as another member, and Alana, what are your thoughts? But I think it's critical that we move forward with it.
Thank you. I don't have clearly, I'm all supportive of that. So I think that goes without saying. And I also just wanted to say, I did just hear from the contact person with Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. Actually, he attended virtually, remotely, by listening to a portion of the earlier meeting today. And we are going to speak so that we can figure out just what you said, Commissioner Gaskin. So I just wanted to let you know we were actually communicating via cell phone, and texting just this evening. So thank you. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
All right.
So Commissioner Nancharat, were you thinking about having that, I know sooner rather than later, a call meeting, or just to have, that's not part of our regular meeting, or to do it with the September meeting?
I'm thinking, based upon what you've already laid out here, not to interrupt that, September for the ethics training, October for the fair housing, maybe November for MCCR, that we just go ahead and have a separate training. Okay. And we can call it just that, at maybe a call. We're calling the call meeting, but and the reason I think we should be a separate, not a call meeting, is that it would include, from my understanding with Alana, it would include the commissioners, it would include the county's Office of Constituent Services, as well as volunteer mediators. Okay. So it'd be a much broader group. So my recommendation would be that we would have a separate training specifically focused on that, and again, sooner rather than later.
Okay. Do you have, I guess we would have to get some dates to see when they're available to actually.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to be on a call with them. I'm going to speak with Chris Van Alstine, one of the guest speakers from earlier, tomorrow. So we'll try to get some tentative dates and bring it back to the body here. Okay.
Do you know how long that training normally lasts? It's an all-day training? Because I'm asking that question because do we have to do it on a Saturday?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't. So I can find out tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion here? There's no need for a motion on this. It's just an action item. We're now down to good and welfare. Any announcements? Please bring them forward.
Mary DeJoni, this isn't an announcement. I typically see old business and new business, and are we intentionally not covering those?
Yeah, we don't have that on the agenda, and we didn't amend our agenda. At this point in time, as the chair of this meeting, I would entertain a motion to, before we go to good and welfare items, to put old business and new business. Okay, is there any old business?
Well, technically, we're covering old business because remember, if I'm not mistaken,
right.
the agenda that we have that we put together
Right.
was the business that was not handled during the previous meeting.
Right.
So I did stand to correct that. As far as new business, yeah.
I have another old business item then. On an entirely different topic, I contacted Mr. Carl Snowden today, and I was also typing minutes. And I became aware that we had intended to invite Mr. Snowden and Dr. Nadav to a meeting.
Natav, yeah.
Natav.
Mm-hmm.
And that was going to fall to Eugene and Mark, and I think Mark, and I don't know if that happened. My conversation with Mr. Snowden suggests he wasn't aware of it because he asked where his request to talk with us about a survey stood.
We covered that, Mary, in the meeting prior to when the county executive was on the call with us, the emergency meeting, and Mark asked the question point blank, which took care of that. It negated the need for Mr. Snowden and Dr. Natav to visit with us. So, unless my recollection is incorrect, and I think that we specifically stated, well, therefore, we don't need to continue that conversation because the decision had already been handled, had been made.
I
Mark,
appreciate your memory on that.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, will somebody then get back and communicate with Mr. Snowden exactly what happened so we can close the loop on this? Mark, would you do that?
Yep, sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, announce good and welfare. Any other good and welfare items? Okay, announcements. The Latino Caucus town hall meeting. Alana, you want to tell us what gives with that?
As far as I know, it's still going on, and I hope that the commission on its Facebook page may have posted that. I think I sent all the commissioners the information about it. It's the Latino. It's being co-sponsored both by CAST and the Latino Caucus, and it's my understanding it is going on tomorrow. Although I recognize and acknowledge that the county executive is having a town hall meeting tonight on police misconduct concerns as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So that can be found by anybody who's interested. Next meeting is September 2020, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, yeah. And we proposed a couple of dates today. Alana, did we decide, was it going to be the 16th or the 23rd? Do you remember?
I think those were the options, and I don't know if you would want to put and present that to the commissioners right now as to their preference. Both dates are open with Arundel TV for us to schedule something. We just need to let them know which is your preference as the body.
Yeah. So, Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Yes. Would it make sense then to Alana send an email out to the or I can send an email. Somebody needs to send an email out to the commissioners with the 2 dates and then see how that falls out. Is that the way we want to handle it?
Yeah, I can send the email out because I was going to actually send an email anyway in the process out. One of the guest speakers sent some materials to me already, and I was going to forward it to the commissioner. So,
Okay, and then let's put a time fence on it, getting back with a response on the date in, in a week. So
oh,
we have,
yes, thank you, thank you. And that's for the regular commission meeting. That's not,
yes,
yes, okay. I just want to make sure I was clear. That's not for the training one that we're talking about
No.
that was bringing up. Okay, thank you.
okay. Any further items for discussion? Hearing none.
Mr.
would
Mr. Peterson, sorry to interrupt you one more time.
Yes, that's fine.
It's hard being the chair, huh? You get interrupted all the time. I'd like to quickly commend you and Faye and Alana for putting together an amazing agenda and putting on a fantastic meeting. Thank you for doing this. I was not supposed to be, at least I didn't intend to be on the call. My leg is doing much better. I'm able to kind of sit up, but as soon as it's over, I'm going to bed. But I want to thank you all for jumping in my time of need. I really, truly appreciate you all allowed me to rest, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks to me go to Faye and Alana. They basically put together the agenda, and all I had to do was kind of like not stumble too much through the meeting. So I appreciate everybody's help in this journey that I've been on tonight. And I agree. I think we had a very productive, successful meeting. So we'll say first, Georgia, get your foot up and go to bed or something. And then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
Okay.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's non-debatable and it's unanimous. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Faye, Georgia, who seconded on that one?
Oh,
Who was
Faye,
the
did you second?
I seconded.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Faye.
Okay. Any more questions? I'm going to end the meeting.
We're done.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.